The video arrived after midnight, long after I had turned off the kitchen light and tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing. It came from an unfamiliar number, a single file with no message attached. The kind of thing people send when they are afraid words will weaken what the image can do. The thumbnail showed a room washed in neon, a crowd of faces caught mid-laugh, and, at the center, a familiar profile I recognized the way a father recognizes his child, even in a blurry photo. My son. My stomach tightened before I even pressed play. The video opened on a birthday banner stretched across a wall. Evan, 33. The camera swung across a rented loft space filled with people in their 20s and 30s, the kind of space that smells like expensive cologne and rented confidence. Glasses clinked, music thumped. Someone shouted a countdown that made no sense to me, a private ritual in a private world. Then the camera found me. I was standing near the edge of the crowd, shoulders slightly hunched, holding a small gift bag in both hands like it was a shield. In the video, I looked exactly like the man I sometimes see in reflective store windows, gray at the temples, careful posture, polite smile that shows up even when the moment does not deserve it. The camera zoomed in as Evan took the bag from me. He did not look at me first. He looked at the crowd, like he needed witnesses. He pulled the item out, my gift, and held it up. A framed photo. Not a generic photo. A picture I had printed and paid to have professionally restored. An old snapshot from the early 90s. Evan at 5 years old on my shoulders at a county fair. Both of us grinning like the world was simple and safe. Laura had taken it on a disposable camera. For years it sat in a shoebox with faded edges and a crease down the middle. I had kept it after she died. One of the few pieces of our early family I could hold without falling apart. I had imagined Evan would see it and remember her. Instead, the video captured his face shifting into an exaggerated grin, the kind a person uses when they are about to turn sincerity into a punchline. He lifted the frame and performed a mock bow to the room. The crowd laughed on cue. Someone near the camera yelled a phrase that landed like a slap even through the speaker. Dad tax. More laughter. More clinking glasses. Someone else shouted something about a nostalgia fee, and the camera shook as the person filming laughed so hard they couldn't hold steady. Evan held the framed photo out like a trophy and made a performance of thanking me, but the performance was aimed at the room, not at me. The performance was not gratitude. It was entertainment. The video ended with a quick pan down to my face, the awkward smile still fixed there because I hadn't yet processed what was happening, because fathers are trained to keep the peace even when the peace costs them dignity. Then the screen went black. I sat in the dark living room and watched it again, because my mind refused to accept it the first time. The second viewing did not soften it. It sharpened it. The laughter was real. The contempt was real. The fact that my son enjoyed it was real. The most painful part was not the crowd. It was how familiar Evan looked in that role. Confident, practiced, comfortable, like he had been doing it for a while. My name is Daniel Kerr. I am 59 years old. I live in a modest house outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place built for families, not for widowers who eat dinner alone. I worked 34 years at a manufacturing plant, first as a mechanic, then as maintenance supervisor. My job was to prevent breakdowns, machines, systems, schedules, because once something breaks, everyone suddenly notices how much they depended on it. I retired 2 years ago on a buyout that felt less like a reward and more like a polite dismissal. The company called it a transition. I called it the end of a routine that kept my mind busy enough to avoid the empty space at home. My wife, Laura, died 7 years ago. Cancer did what it does. It took her with quiet cruelty, one appointment at a time, one bad scan at a time, until our life became a set of logistics. Medications, insurance calls, hospice schedules. The last months blurred into a mix of exhaustion and hope that should have been unrealistic but wasn't, because hope is what you cling to when you cannot accept the alternative. After she died, my world didn't just get smaller, it got quieter. Our son, Evan, was 26 then. Grief hit him like it hits many young men, in bursts, loud sadness followed by long stretches of pretending. He told people he was fine, then drank too much at night. He promised to take care of himself, then asked me for help with rent because work was complicated. At the time, I understood it as grief. I did not understand it as a new way of living. The first money I gave him after Laura's funeral wasn't even a transfer. It was cash in an envelope because I didn't want a record. I didn't want Evan to feel like he was being tracked. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to feel like he still had family holding him up. It felt like love. Then cash became transfers because he moved around and cash felt clumsy. Transfers became regular because his problems didn't disappear. Regular transfers became expected because expectation grows fast when you feed it. The year after Laura died, I paid Evan's phone bill temporarily. I paid his car insurance until things stabilized. I covered a credit card payment because the interest was killing him. I co-signed a lease because he needed a place that felt like a reset. Each time I told myself it was the last time. Each time I believed it. Fathers can be naive when they are lonely. Loneliness makes you confuse being needed with being loved. By the time Evan turned 30, the money had become a system. My banking app had recurring payments set up around his life, his phone plan, his car insurance, a monthly support transfer that started as a bridge and turned into a lane he drove on without looking. Sometimes the requests came with urgency, a surprise expense, a late fee, a job commission that hadn't cleared. Sometimes the requests came with emotional leverage, stress, depression, the weight of grief that he insisted never stopped. Sometimes the requests came with subtle shame, a tone that implied a good father wouldn't question it. I rarely questioned. I told myself I was protecting him. I told myself I was preventing him from falling. What I didn't see was that I was building him a floor made of my retirement. I didn't see it until the night of his birthday party, when humiliation arrived in a video file and showed me exactly what my role had become. The cruelest part was how perfectly the timestamp fit. Earlier that same evening, hours before the party, Evan had asked for a transfer. Not a gift, not a birthday treat, a transfer. The request came through in a text that framed it as practical and urgent, a deposit issue that had to be handled by end of day. The kind of problem that is always one step away from a catastrophe if you don't act fast. I sent the money. I sent it fast. Then I drove to his party with a framed photo in a gift bag, thinking I was giving him a piece of his mother. By the time I got home, the photo had become a punchline, and the money I sent had become a joke shared among strangers. I stared at my phone until my eyes felt dry and gritty. The unfamiliar number didn't send another message. Whoever sent the video had already done what they wanted. They had forced me to see. I slept in fragments. I woke up around 3 and walked through my house in socks, passing the hallway photos Laura had hung, touching the frame of our wedding picture like the glass might steady me. I returned to the living room and watched the video again, looking for the details my mind missed the first time. I saw my own posture, the subtle lean forward like I was trying to earn acceptance. I saw Evan's expression, not just a moment of thoughtless cruelty, but a practiced enjoyment of his audience. I saw the way his friends looked at me, not with hostility, but with the casual amusement reserved for a person whose feelings do not matter. I saw something else too. I saw that Evan's friends were comfortable saying "dad tax" out loud in front of me. That kind of comfort doesn't come from a single night. It comes from a pattern. It comes from a shared understanding that the father is not a person. He's a resource. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my laptop like I was about to solve a problem at work. I needed facts. Facts are the only thing that can keep you from drowning in emotion. I pulled up my bank statements for the last 12 months. I highlighted every transaction connected to Evan. The list was longer than I expected, and the amounts were higher than I wanted to admit. Some were obvious. The monthly support transfer, the phone plan, the car insurance. Others were not. There were charges labeled with event companies I didn't recognize. A catering service, a rental platform, a streaming bundle that wasn't mine, a subscription I never used but had been renewing for months. Several small purchases that clustered on weekends and matched the pattern of someone living beyond their means. I pulled up the credit card account I used for household expenses and scrolled through the merchant names. There it was, a charge from a venue booking service, a deposit. 2 weeks earlier. The amount made my throat tighten. Then another charge from a catering company. Then a rental charge for lighting equipment. Then a charge from a liquor delivery service. The pattern formed a picture too clear to ignore. I had paid for Evan's birthday party. Not as a father choosing to celebrate his son. As a wallet Evan used to impress his friends. I sat very still, letting the shame rise and then settle. Shame is what you feel when you realize you participated in your own disrespect. My hands moved again, methodical. I expanded the transaction details for the venue deposit. The billing email on file wasn't mine. It was Evan's, which meant my card information had been saved in his account. My card, my security code, my billing address. He had access. I felt a second layer of fear rise beneath the humiliation. Humiliation hurts your pride. Fear threatens your safety. Evan knew my personal information. He knew my social security number. He knew my mother's maiden name. He knew the answers to every security question designed to protect me from strangers, and he had already demonstrated he treated me like a joke. I stopped the audit and called my bank. I requested a new card number immediately. I requested that all digital wallet tokens be revoked. I requested transaction alerts on every purchase above a small threshold. I asked the representative to review authorized users and linked devices. The representative's tone shifted into professional caution when she found something I didn't expect. An authorized user, Evan, not on the main card I used daily. On an older line of credit I thought I had canceled years ago. The line had remained open, dormant but active, renewed automatically, the kind of helpful feature banks offer to keep accounts alive. Evan's name was still attached. His spending had been minimal for months, small enough to hide. Then the party charges appeared. A spike, a test turning into a binge. I removed him immediately. I changed the online banking password and turned on two-factor authentication that required my phone, not just a code sent to an email address. I ended the call and sat in silence, listening to the coffee maker click as if nothing had happened. I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with exploitation. And exploitation is not corrected with a heartfelt talk. It's corrected with access control. By noon, my phone began vibrating with Evan's name. Call after call, then texts, not apologies, questions, confusion that sounded like entitlement. I didn't read them yet. I wasn't ready to absorb his performance. I needed to finish securing my life first. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. It took 20 minutes and felt like locking doors in a house that had been left open for years. I placed a fraud alert on my credit profile. I checked my reports for new accounts. Nothing obvious yet, but I had learned not to confuse not yet with never. Then I checked the mail. A plain envelope sat in the box with a return address from a financing company I didn't recognize. It looked like routine marketing, but so did the first letter in every fraud story I had ever heard. I opened it at my kitchen counter and felt my stomach drop. It was a confirmation of a buy now, pay later account, opened with my name. The letter thanked me for applying and listed a credit limit. It was new. It was real. The shipping address on file was not my house. It was an apartment complex across town, Evans Building. The humiliation video wasn't just proof of mockery. It was a warning that my son's sense of entitlement had crossed into identity abuse. I sat down and forced myself to breathe, the same way I used to breathe during plant emergencies when an alarm went off and everyone looked at me for a decision. Verify, contain, document. I called the financing company and reported the account as fraudulent. I asked for their fraud department. I requested the application record and the IP log. I demanded immediate closure and a written confirmation. I referenced the fraud alert on my credit profile and the credit freeze. I filed an identity theft report through the Federal Trade Commission website and saved the report number. Then I went to the police station and filed a report. Sitting under fluorescent lights, explaining that my son likely opened an account in my name, felt surreal. I had spent years teaching Evan about responsibility. Now I was describing him like a suspect. The officer asked if I knew who did it. I gave Evan's name with a calm that surprised me, not because it didn't hurt, but because the facts were too clear to hide from. The report number mattered. It was a key that could unlock disputes and protect my record. Paper is protection when family is not. That night, I finally read Evan's messages. They weren't apologies. They weren't shame. They were pressure. He described issues. He described urgency. He described consequences. He described how I was making his life harder. He described how the party was a misunderstanding, the kind of phrase people use when they want you to accept nonsense as resolution. Nothing in his messages acknowledged the laughter. Nothing acknowledged my face in that video. Nothing acknowledged the phrase, "Dad tax," yelled in my direction. The money tap was closing, and Evan was panicking. Panic makes people honest sometimes. More often, panic makes people mean. 2 days later, a new video arrived from the same unknown number. This one was shorter, filmed near the end of the party. The camera pointed at a cluster of Evan's friends holding drinks and laughing. Evan was in the center, performing again. He held up his phone and showed a banking app screen. My transfer. He had taken a screenshot and made it part of the night's entertainment. The crowd reacted like he had revealed a magic trick. The phrase, "Dad tax," appeared again, louder, like a chant. Someone toasted me without my name, to the sponsor, to the ATM with a house. The camera swung toward me again and captured my smile still fixed in place. My eyes a little too wide, my body too rigid. Then the clip ended. I didn't cry. I felt something harder take root. A boundary, not a threat. A boundary. I called an attorney. Her name was Sylvia Mercer. She handled elder financial exploitation cases, a phrase I hated because it implied weakness. Sylvia didn't use it like an insult. She used it like a category of crime. She explained that exploitation inside families is common because access is common. She explained that documentation is the difference between a sad story and a defensible case. Sylvia recommended a practical sequence. Secure accounts, document abuse, communicate boundaries in writing, avoid unrecorded confrontations, prepare for escalation through social pressure. The last part sounded dramatic until I remembered how comfortable Evan looked, humiliating me in front of a crowd. A person who treats you like a joke will recruit an audience when the joke stops being profitable. I wrote a letter, not a text. A letter printed, signed, copied. It outlined my rules in plain language. No more transfers, no more payments, No access to my accounts, cards, or credit. If help was ever offered, it would be direct to verified providers and only within a documented plan. Any attempt to open accounts in my name would be treated as fraud, reported, and pursued. The letter included Sylvia's office contact. It was not a negotiation. It was not a conversation starter. It was a boundary that could not be twisted easily. I sent it certified. Then I waited for the response I already knew would come. It came in the form of my sister's voice on the phone. Diane sounded anxious. She had heard from Evan. She had been told a story that cast him as stressed and me as stubborn. A story that made it sound like I was losing my mind in retirement. I listened without interrupting. Then I sent her the videos, the humiliation clip, the transfer screenshot clip, the credit account confirmation letter with Evan's address, a summary of my payments. I did not add commentary. I let the evidence speak. Diane called back later and cried. She apologized. She described feeling sick. I didn't want her apology as much as I wanted something else. I wanted the pressure to stop. I wanted my family to stop treating my bank account like a shared resource. My mother, 82 and fragile, reacted with shock that turned into denial. She tried to frame it as a phase. She tried to frame it as grief. Grief doesn't forge accounts. Grief doesn't chant dad tax while your father stands in the room. The next escalation arrived a week after my letter. A new attempt appeared on my credit monitoring dashboard, a personal loan inquiry. It did not succeed because my credit was frozen, but the attempt existed. Someone tried to open a line with my information and failed. That failure mattered. It proved intent. I provided the alert to Sylvia and updated the police report. Then I changed my home locks. It felt dramatic. It felt like something you do when you are afraid of burglars, not when you are afraid of your own child. But fear doesn't care about the relationship label. Fear responds to access. Evan had a key to my house from years ago, a spare I gave him just in case. Just in case had become a dangerous phrase. I changed the locks. I changed the garage code. I updated my alarm system contacts. I removed Evan from the list. Then I sat at my kitchen table and realized how much of my life had been designed around the assumption that my son would never harm me. Assumptions are comfortable. Comfort is expensive when it's wrong. Evan reacted to the boundaries the way Sylvia predicted. First came silence, a recalibration. Then came guilt, a softened attempt to pull me back. Then came anger, sharp and accusatory. Then came social pressure. Extended family members reached out with concerned tones. Old friends asked what was going on. A co-worker I hadn't spoken to in months sent a message implying he heard I was cutting off my kid. Evan was building a narrative. Narratives are weapons for people who don't want to admit facts. I did not fight him publicly. I did not post online. I did not argue in comment sections. I did not become the villain in his story by acting like one. I kept my circle small and factual. If someone mattered to me, they received evidence privately. If someone didn't, they received silence. Silence was my new boundary too. The most painful weapon Evan tried was the one Sylvia warned me about, my granddaughter. Sophie was 8, bright and shy and obsessed with soccer. Evan's relationship with Sophie's mother had ended years earlier. Their custody arrangement was complicated, and Evan used that complication like a shield. Whenever money came up, Sophie came up too. Her needs, her school supplies, her future. It always worked because Sophie was real and innocent and the part of my family I refused to lose. Evan sent photos of Sophie looking sad, paired with vague captions designed to make me imagine her crying at night. The images landed in my chest like stones. I did not respond to Evan. I responded with a different plan. Sylvia helped me structure it. support for Sophie could exist without handing Evan cash. I contacted Sophie's mother directly, not to attack Evan, but to build a clean channel. Sophie's mother had always been more grounded than Evan, and in a quiet conversation, she confirmed what I suspected. Evan's finances were chaotic, and his stories rarely matched reality. We created a simple system. If Sophie needed something, it would be paid directly to the school, the clinic, or the program. No transfers to Evan, no emergencies without verification. It was boring on purpose. Boring is where safety lives. The first time Evan realized Sophie could no longer be used as leverage, he escalated again. He showed up at my house, not to apologize, not to repair, but to pressure. He parked in my driveway and sat in his car for nearly an hour. He didn't come to the door. He didn't knock. He just waited, the way a person waits when they believe the discomfort will force compliance. I watched him through the window and did not open the door. When he finally left, I felt something settle inside me. Not hatred, finality. Weeks passed. Consequences began doing what consequences do when someone has been living on someone else's money. Evan's car insurance lapsed. He lost coverage. He blamed me. His rent became a problem. He blamed me. The party debt he put on my card became his problem. He blamed me. Blame is easier than responsibility when you have been allowed to avoid responsibility for years. I stayed consistent. Consistency is a language exploiters understand. In late October, the police investigation reached a small but important point. The financing company provided confirmation that the BNPL account had been opened from an IP address associated with Evan's apartment complex Wi-Fi. It wasn't absolute proof, but it was evidence layered onto a pattern. Pattern is what courts and banks respond to. The account was removed from my credit. The inquiry was suppressed. My record steadied. Evans did not. In December, a handwritten note arrived in my mailbox. Not from Evan, from Trent, one of Evan's friends. The note was short and awkward, the kind of handwriting that suggests a person who doesn't write letters often. It described guilt. It described regret. It described how the party jokes had gone too far, how the chant had started as a thing Evan said in private and became a group identity. The note included one sentence that explained more than anything else. The humiliation was not spontaneous. It was the theme. Evan had been calling my support dad tax for months. He had built his social image around it. He had made it part of his personality, the way some people build personality around a car brand or a gym routine. My money was his costume. Trent didn't ask me for anything. He didn't demand forgiveness. He simply wrote that he was sorry and that he had sent the video because he couldn't watch it anymore. I saved the note in my documentation folder, not to punish Evan, to remember what truth looks like when people stop participating in a lie. Christmas arrived, and I did not spend it with Evan. I spent it with my sister and my mother, and later in the day, with Sophie and her mother. It was not a perfect holiday. It was a careful one. But when Sophie ran toward me with grass stains on her leggings and showed me a drawing she made, I felt something real return. A relationship not built on money. A relationship built on presence. It was a reminder that being a father does not require being a financial hostage. The months after Christmas were quiet in the way quiet can be when it's earned. No new credit inquiries, no letters from lenders, no surprise charges. Evan tried a few times to reopen contact with messages that sounded softer, messages that leaned on nostalgia and implied growth. The messages did not include accountability. They did not include a clear acknowledgement of what he did. They described his feelings, not my harm. That was not enough. Then, in March, something shifted. Not dramatically, not like a movie redemption scene. A small shift in the facts. Sophie's mother emailed that Evan had taken on a second job. She wrote that he had been sober for 3 months. She wrote that he had started therapy, not because someone told him to, but because his life had become small and he needed to understand why. She didn't ask me to help him. She simply shared information. Information, not pressure. I appreciated that. In April, a letter arrived from Evan. A real letter on paper, not a text designed to catch me off guard. The letter was uneven. It didn't read like a polished apology written by a therapist. It read like a man trying to hold two truths at once: shame and pride. The letter acknowledged the party. It acknowledged the phrase. It acknowledged the money. It did not excuse it fully, but it tried. It described stress, influence, grief, resentment. The last paragraph was the first thing he wrote that sounded like responsibility. It described understanding that he had turned my kindness into a joke and that he had treated my loneliness like a lever. It did not ask for money. It asked for time. Time is the only thing you cannot fake with a transfer. I did not rush. I answered with terms. No money, no access, no rebuilding in private without accountability. If Evan wanted contact, it would be slow and consistent and boring and respectful. There would be no emergency requests, no urgent transfers, no sudden guilt campaigns. If Evan wanted help for Sophie, it would continue through direct payments to providers, nothing else. If Evan wanted trust, he would earn it through repetition, not promises. Weeks passed after my response. Silence again. Then another shift. A small one. Evan began showing up for Sophie's games without drama. Evan began sticking to schedules. Evan began paying his own bills. Evan began letting the consequences land without turning them into my responsibility. That didn't erase what happened. Nothing erases a chant shouted about you while you stood in the room. But it did create a new pattern, and patterns matter. In June, I agreed to meet Evan in a public place with Sylvia's recommendation and my sister nearby. Not to mediate, but to keep the setting safe. I did not go hoping for reconciliation. I went hoping for clarity. What I saw was not the man in the video performing for a crowd. What I saw was a tired man, thinner than I remembered, eyes less sharp, posture less cocky. He looked like someone who had finally met his own numbers and understood that debt is not just financial. Debt is relational too. He did not ask for money. He did not talk about his problems like weapons. He acknowledged harm in a way that sounded simple and real, not theatrical. That mattered. I did not soften boundaries. I did allow a small opening, a chance, not a blank slate, a chance that required work. Over the next months, the work continued. Evan stayed employed. He stayed sober. He stayed consistent with Sophie. He failed sometimes and fixed it without demanding rescue. He stopped recruiting an audience to shame me. When I think back on the birthday party video, I still feel the sting. But the sting is not the last thing anymore. The last thing is the lesson. I used to believe being a good father meant absorbing pain quietly so my child could avoid it. Now I understand something else. Being a good father sometimes means refusing to fund disrespect, even when the person disrespecting you shares your blood, especially then. The night I watched that video, I thought I was watching the end of my relationship with my son. In reality, I was watching the end of a role that was killing my dignity. The role of wallet, the role of sponsor, the role of dad tax. When I stopped paying it, I didn't become lonely. I became free. End.